Welcome everyone to today's preview of our Welcoming Newcomers playbook. This is the first in a series of playbooks that we're putting out each month to really take all of our learning and research and make it available to everyone so that everyone can be part of this movement to reconnect our country. This playbook is a condensed version, or this webinar is a condensed version of the playbook, just sharing the headlines. The full playbook is going to be released tomorrow, but you're getting a sneak preview today. So just to jump right in, 13 million Americans move every year. And what we see is 40% of them are struggling with social connection. This playbook is designed to help explain how you can play a key role in helping to transform your city by helping these newcomers connect. I wanted to share how we went about creating this playbook. It's really based on 2 years of research. It started with focus groups. I did dinners at my home with strangers for about 6 to 9 months. Every 2 weeks, I'd have 8, 10, 12 strangers over, and we'd talk about their experience with connection, their experience with moving. We then went and looked at a lot of great programs around the country where people were doing some form of welcoming of new residents to understand what they were doing, what was working, what wasn't working. We then piloted in Seattle, the first ever official city newcomer onboarding experience last year to really give it a try to figure out how could we actually build this as a model for the future. We then also looked at other life transitions and other organizations where there was an intentionality put to helping people feel welcome and looked at what was working and what were their best practices and how could those be applied, because they may not be the same as welcoming newcomers, but I think you'll see a lot of the psychology, a lot of the moves are very similar. And then most recently, we conducted a national survey of close to 2,000 people about the experience of social connection, including those who are newcomers who had recently moved. This playbook is really designed for 4 different audiences. The first is mayors and city halls. We believe within the next 5 years, every city is going to have an onboarding process for newcomers. The case is just so clear that there's a need for this, and the ROI for it is just so incredibly clear as well. It's for nonprofit backbone organizations that are actually creating the infrastructure for social connection. It's for employers and universities that are often the ones relocating people to new places that can play and need to play a really important role in this process. And then finally, it's for institutions that are building experiences and want to connect with newcomers, from museums to libraries to small business. This playbook gives insights into how do you market and engage newcomers. All of this in our research really points to one core finding, which is the people that are thriving when they move, the people that are thriving 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, they've adopted 6 core practices. And we're going to go into these in detail, but we call these the 6 points of connection. And everything we're doing here at the U.S. Chamber of Connection is about how do we start to build the habits? How do we start to make it easy for everyone to adopt these 6 practices? Because we know that when they do, they thrive, but their society, their community thrives as well. This is really the key to re-engineering society to be connection first, to be a connection forward society. This is the most important point. So if you're doing something else, this is the one moment you want to focus. The biggest aha for us here in Seattle and in this research is that welcoming new residents is great for the new residents, but perhaps, and probably more likely, the biggest win is what we found it did psychologically for everyone else. The simple act of calling people to service to help those that are moving, to help those that are new to your community, brings out the best in people. It's on a small scale like a natural disaster where we see when there's a natural disaster, people stand up and sort of show up as their best selves. At least most of them do. And what we're finding is that when you get people focused on helping newcomers, it brings out the same impulse, the same desire to help others that brings out the best in people. It causes them to want to serve, and it really helps to reshape the culture of a community. And that's why we think newcomers, above and beyond helping the newcomers, is critical to actually getting people into a connection and service mindset. It is a trigger for thinking differently about your role in society. This playbook, as I mentioned, is part of a series. Every month, we're going to be releasing a new playbook on a different aspect of helping rebuild connection in our country. Next month is about community service, and we will then go through each of the 6 points of connection. But they're all built off of our study that we released last month, a national study on the state of connection in America, on the 6 points of connection. So if you haven't seen that yet, strongly encourage you to go to our website and check out that full report because it really provides a clear picture of what's going on in our country and what we need to do to actually take action and stop just worrying about it, but actually move into hopeful action. Whoop, and I just went out of mode here. Hold on. That was exciting. Hold on. Well, I think that's still working. Uh, They're back in mode. Sorry about that. And then just quickly, I wanted to sort of share who we are, the United States Chamber of Connection, and share my contact information. I started the U.S. Chamber of Connection because I believe the decline in connection and trust is the greatest challenge facing Seattle, America, and the world. And that if we don't do something together to address this, we don't have a chance of returning and building a society built on connection. There are so many people doing amazing work, but if we don't come together, if we don't connect around connection, we're not going to make the progress we need. So we're really working to elevate connection as a cause. We're building backbone measures like the 6 points of connection. We're building ecosystems across sectors. And then we're launching chambers of connection in every city in America over the next decade so that connection becomes a fundamental organizing principle for our country. So let's jump into it, the actual content of the playbook. And again, about half of the playbook is in here. The rest is going to be released tomorrow with in-depth content on a wide range of details on everything that you're seeing today. So let's start with who's moving and where. You look at national data, and the US Census Bureau has great data on this. What we see is the people that are most likely to be moving are sort of young adults. They tend to be renters. They tend to be single, but you see young couples as well. More often than not, they're college educated, and they tend to have cost-burdened households. They're often living underwater financially. We see are less likely are longtime homeowners because they usually are more entrenched in their existing community. Families with school-age kids are less likely to move, and seniors, unless they're retiring, are also less likely to move. So why are they moving? We see it's a wide range of things. It can be housing affordability. We see a lot of people migrating to lower cost communities. Some of them are because they're forming a household for the first time and they're thinking about where they want to be. Some want to be closer, or in some cases further away from their existing family. And then we see a percentage of people who are really moving because of work opportunities for both career advancement and financial. What we see though with this group that's most likely to move is there is a great loss of social capital for them. There's higher integration risk, and there's fewer built-in support systems for them. When we talk about relocation, we talk about helping newcomers. I also just wanted to point out, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done on this, but just the reality that the majority of people who are moving, or the most likely, are white adults who are more likely to move between counties. Black and Latino adults move less long distance. They move long distance less often. And we're seeing like there's a real difference here in socioeconomic class and race when it comes to moving. And you look at this on two sides. One is who's actually moving and what barriers are we creating for people to be able to move based on socioeconomic class, race, etc. But then also when people move who are of non-white demographics, what we tend to see is that they have harder integration points in a lot of places. In some places it's easier, but in a lot of places it's much more challenging, especially when we look at long-standing challenges with housing, with access to housing. So as we think about who's moving, it's really important to look at, who are the majority that are moving, but also think about some of the people who are maybe constrained in their moving, but also people who may find additional barriers when they move. We thought it'd be helpful to think about what are the different types of cities that you're in and how might the demographic or the dynamics vary based on the type of city you're in. So I'd love to just pause here and for folks in the chat, just to say which one of these types of cities best represents where you think you are. So the first, we call it an everyday quiet anchor. This is sort of a stable city, modest growth, pretty stable in terms of how it operates. You're not seeing a huge influx in and out. So you may be seeing 6 to 9% difference. A boomtown integrator, that's a place like Seattle that's just growing very, very quickly and trying to integrate a lot of newcomers into maybe what was traditionally not a boom city. You see dynamic cities, ones like New York and LA and Chicago that just have a constant influx of people coming and going, and that migration actually defines the city in a lot of ways. You then have rebuilder cities. These are cities where they've had population loss or stagnation, or they have trouble retaining the people who grew up in that town. And then you have lifestyle magnets, places like Boise or Asheville, where people are moving there mostly for lifestyle. So again, let's just take a quick second. Would love to have you go into the chat and just share which of these do you feel like best describes where you live? Are you a everyday quiet anchor, a boomtown integrator, a dynamic city, a rebuilder city, or a lifestyle magnet? And I would say Seattle is actually interesting because I think it's a boomtown integrator, but also a lifestyle magnet. We find a lot of people move here for lifestyle. So it's a little bit of both. So let's give everybody a chance to share where they think they are. Baltimore, rebuilder, rebuilding well. This is great. We got Baltimore. It seems like you're all on the same page about Baltimore, which is great to see. St. Louis is lifestyle. I'd love to hear more about that, Jennifer, at some point. Boston definitely is a boom town. I can totally see that. One of the things we saw that I put in the playbook that's not here too is there's two other types of dynamics. One is institution-based cities where you have like a major university or employer, think like a Bentonville or an Ann Arbor, where the dynamic really is built around that institution. And the other are border cities. And even though right now we are seeing a major decrease in international migration and immigration, that's likely cyclical. So we'll likely see that come again. So it's also interesting to think about if you're close to the border, if you're a place where you get a lot of international migration, that tends to shift some of the dynamics as well. All right. So that's really a question of like who's moving and where are they moving to? And again, there's more on that inside the actual full playbook. Next, I wanted to share sort of why newcomers matter to cities. So many of you I know are excited about the idea of how do we build newcomer onboarding into a city? How do you make the business case? How do you make the civic case for it? And wanted to share some of the headlines there. One of the great things that we found in Seattle about work focusing on newcomers is that there are many, many institutions that are part of a newcomer's experience. And it's in their economic, social, and civic best interest to find ways to proactively serve this population. So you see employer and workplaces. They very much are bringing people to town. They need to find ways to integrate them so they stay. Housing and real estate, I think that's relatively straightforward. Home setup and retail, so significant economic transactions happening around people setting up home in a new place. Groceries and daily consumption. People are trying to figure out where are they going to shop on their day-to-day groceries, and the places that are able to build a relationship may have someone for years to come as a customer. Local government and public services. So often a lot of transactions and interactions with the local city at the beginning, including utilities and connectivity providers. So getting your cell phone, your Wi-Fi, all that set up, and then healthcare systems. So all these stakeholders have a vested interest and an opportunity to engage with newcomers, including, others that didn't even make this cut, like sports teams, museums, like all the sort of cultural entertainment institutions that also are part of a newcomer's experience. So as you're thinking about building a platform for newcomers, think about all these people as your allies. You have aligned incentives to make it happen. And sort of back of the envelope using a bunch of different sources, we estimate for an average mover household, they spend about $26,000 in the local economy almost immediately. So as you're looking at, again, how do you make this case? These folks, it's not just about being a good neighbor. It's not just about, doing the right thing. Like there is real reason for local business, local nonprofits, et cetera, to get engaged with this population because they represent a significant opportunity for economic development. That's the economic side. The other side that's important to talk about is really the civic side. So let's pretend you're a mayor, or maybe you are a mayor of a town, a city. Newcomers represent a really exciting opportunity because at their lowest cost to engage, there's no friction in the system. They don't know, other candidates. They don't have a preconceived notion necessarily about your city. Therefore, they're more open-minded. They're more open to differences in people or approaches. They don't have civic habits yet for that city, so you can help establish civic habits. And they represent the future civic backbone. They're the future donors, or the future voters, or the future volunteers. So as someone who is a civic leader, a mayor, an elected in a city or town, these represent a tremendous amount of value for your city if you engage them early. I also wanted to really focus on one of the topics that came up a lot in Seattle and it does nationally, which is when you have new people moving into town, you tend to see gentrification happening. You tend to see a lot of longtime residents feeling like they're pushed out or they're not respected. You see a lot of animosity, often towards newcomers. And some of this is somewhat inevitable just based on migration and things that are dynamics that are, bigger than any one neighborhood or city. But there's a lot the research shows that you can do about this. Um, First of all, it's making it not personal, like making it so that, while there might be frustration with the broader system and changes in society, that people are not making it personal about their neighbor, about the person who just moved in, or the person who just moved in being about the person who lives next door. How can you make it sort of clear that this is structural, not personal? Um, if you do have unmanaged growth, it builds fear. Like you need to have a plan as a city for how you're managing growth and to state your intentionality about it. And to be able to, through that process, really honor the legacy and history of the city and the place in which people are moving. And then if you actually proactively integrate newcomers, they go from them to us, and it removes a lot of the tension that otherwise forms. So as you're thinking about your onboarding of newcomers, really think about how are you addressing the needs of people who've been in your town, your city for such a long time? How are you helping to integrate new folks in a way that's respectable and respectful and lifts everyone up? So we're now going to shift into talking a little bit about the newcomer experience. And this is really fun. I love behavioral science, so I loved looking into like what is the actual experience of a newcomer. This is the typical arc of a thriving new resident. So this is someone who ends up thriving in your city. They go from at the beginning being like, this is great, fresh start, like anything's possible, like I'm so excited to move, or I just got here. And it's just this sense of almost euphoric opportunity and growth mindset. But then after a little while, you sort of get into this arrival shock. You have like all these tasks you have to do. You've got all this anxiety about how am I going to make this work? Why is everything so hard? Why do I have to learn all these new systems? And then you sort of hit this bottom moment where you're like, ugh, did we make a mistake? Why did we move here? And at that point, those that end up thriving start to find ways to feel like they belong. They start to say, I know where to go now. They end up getting to a point where they say, like, this feels like home. And this is really the goal for someone when they've moved. If you want to really build a great program, what you want to do is to help them get to this point to say, this feels like home. I feel like a Seattleite. I feel like a New Yorker. I feel like an Angelino, whatever the city is, like that they feel like this is home, that their place they live feels like home, their neighborhood feels like home. That's where you want to get them to. And certainly, if people move a lot of times, they start to have a slightly different curve here, but you still see some degree of this kind of a emotional arc for people. What we saw in our national data set in terms of what people are experiencing in their first year, 27% lack reliable social support, 42% are not thriving, 39% are saying, I don't trust others. They're sort of sitting in that anxiety and judgment. And because that 37% say they're not really interested in meeting other people, and 20% feel politically disempowered. So it's important to just get a sense for the mindset of a lot of people who are moving. A lot of them are in a growth mindset. They're open and excited for new things, but a lot of people are operating out of fear. And we need to figure out how to design programs that both address the needs of those that are in that growth, optimistic purpose mindset, but also how to help people who may be coming out of more fear be able to come out of that and to start to use that move as an opportunity for them to bridge. And a big part of that is that we as a culture romanticize moving. It's a sort of manifest destiny, move west, like move to college, move for the new job. We tend to, for economic reasons, for social reasons that we think are in our best interest, we tend to move a lot. I've moved 12 times in my life. It's been incredibly disruptive. And if you look at the typical person, and a typical adult has one close friend, 10 close friends, or like less close friends, and then 50 weak ties. So if you think about moving, you're leaving behind almost all of that. And you think about what it requires to actually build those relationships. A close or best friend is 200 hours. A friend might be 90 hours, and a weak tie might be 5 hours. So when you're moving, you're having to rebuild all that. You're losing over 1,000 hours of developed relationships. And it's exciting to meet all these new people, but it's also important to recognize that sense of loss that people are having, that pain of leaving people behind. And that doesn't mean that people aren't excited to meet new people. It doesn't mean that they're not going to stay in touch with some of those people. But there is a sense of mourning in realizing what you've left behind and all those relationships. What we also saw in the data is that compared to people who are not moving, people who have moved in the last year are experiencing um, roughly one more life transition than they are. There's typically an additional life transition that's associated with that move. So life transitions, again, they bring out the best and worst in us. They bring out excitement and opportunity, but also fear and anxiety. So it's really important to have a sense of empathy for people going through this experience. When we look at people who are sort of in their first year of moving, you see a wide range of other life transitions they're going through. The most common is they're actually experiencing some change in their health or ability, which can be a very challenging thing to navigate. And then you put a move on top of that, that's really, really hard. 30% are moving and they got a new job. 21% sort of recently became a caregiver for a kid. 20% just got married or recently got married or started a new relationship, and so on. So you see all these different life changes. So it's not when you're meeting someone who's just moved, it's unlikely that they only have that one life change happening. There's probably something else going on. So as you think about building programs for them, really thinking about how do you support both the move, but also understanding what is that other life transition that they're going through. As we look at this newcomer, this new resident population, what we see is they actually have slightly higher connection than the average population. I think a lot of that is because they put more emphasis on connection, but it's also because it tends to be a higher socioeconomic class population, which already has slightly higher connection. But you see, though, despite that, only 29% of them are thriving. We've got 31% that are healthy, and then we see, 40% that really are struggling. They're either vulnerable or at risk. And that we see as a result of that, you see correlations to everything from, their openness to meeting others to their challenges with feeling like they're engaged politically, et cetera. What you see with these 29% of people who are thriving, what they're doing is that they're investing in these 6 points of connection. They're building a neighborhood contact. They're finding a community of identity. They're building one-on-one regular relationships. They're visiting a third place consistently. They're developing a community of play, somewhere where they get together with people who have shared activities. And they're getting involved in the community. They're getting involved in community service. This is the recipe as you're building out programs in your city or town that you want to help people get to. How are you helping them develop these 6 points in their life? I want to go through these, with you each separately. Again, more detail on this in the actual playbook. But we see only 43% of movers have a neighbor they feel like they can count on in an emergency. This is so important because it really helps people feel grounded immediately and feel like a place is home. If you move to a place and in the first year you don't really feel like you've made that relationship, it can pretty quickly feel like that's not really my home. And again, as we saw in that experience chart, getting to that point where you feel like it's home is so important. And this is one of the true anchors to that. If you don't feel like you know your neighbors, if you can't rely on them, it isn't really home. The next piece is you want people to be able to find a community where they have shared experience. It could be other newcomers. It could be based on race. It could be based on being a parent. It could be based on religion. It could be based on a sports affinity. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But another way to quickly help people feel like this is home and I belong is that they have a community they get together with regularly that has something fundamentally in common with them, where they can immediately find shortcuts to connection. We find 41% of people have that in their first year. But the majority do not find that in their first year. The other thing that's important is trying to build that habit of just a couple times a week or more, getting together with someone else for a coffee, for a walk, some kind of meaningful social interaction. And we see just over a third of people are doing that in their first year. This is a great opportunity for people in the community to reach out, become that neighborhood contact, go for that walk, get coffee regularly, help them build those habits around that one-on-one connection. The lowest we've seen is around third places. So only 30% of newcomers are actually finding that place where they can just go out and be in community, whether it's a gym, whether it's a synagogue, whether it's a local cafe, just that place they can go regularly and be among other people to start to feel like they're in community. Even if it's much more about, loose ties, it's so important for them to find that place. And this is a great opportunity for all your local nonprofits and businesses and faith-based organizations to really step up and build a relationship with these folks. This is the one that matters the most, is helping people find a community of people to do activities together with. And we find this is the place where newcomers are most likely to see success. Roughly half of them do this. They find a community around shared activity. This is one of the best ways to really activate newcomers. They're looking for this. They're looking for that pickleball club. They're looking for that knitting club. They're looking for that running club. Being able to help them do that is critically important. And we're seeing that much more so than the general population. Newcomers are actually seeking that out and finding it. And then finally, we see about 41% of people are volunteering in their first year. This again, and I hear this from a lot of people, like they moved somewhere, the first thing they did is they found a way to serve. Because when you serve, it's a really powerful way of expressing gratitude and expressing a desire to invest in the place that you live, of showing it's not just about you, but that actually you have something to give back and that you have gratitude for the community in which you're moving. Finding ways for people to be able to volunteer, to find easy ways for them to start to connect with community is a really powerful way for them to feel connection to community, to connection to city, but it's also a great way to meet people who are new to the city or people who've been there for a long time who are also looking for connection. But building these 6 points of connection, what we found is that people who moved have 35% more barriers to connection than the general population. So despite this being like generally a more affluent community, they're seeing more barriers to connection than the average person. You see a range of things that people report as their barriers. Most common here I'm seeing are I'm too tired or busy. We're seeing things feel too far away. What we see with people who haven't moved, they don't report that problem nearly as often of things feeling too far away because they've got a sense of grounding into the geography. But it can be intimidating when you first move, when you feel like things are further away than maybe even they really are. It's hard to keep going after I get started. So being able to build that routine of knowing people well enough to actually have the comfort to go back to something over and over again. People feel like it's uncomfortable, going out by themselves. People don't know where to start. I mean, there's a range of barriers, and this is really your role in building an onboarding program for new residents. How can we address these needs for people? So, in summary of this section, arrivals is a civic moment. This is a moment to lift up and bring out the best in your current residents, but it's also a moment to like really set a tone and engagement for the new folks. And those new people may only be 5 or 10, or maybe the most 15% of your city. But if you think about doing that for that population over 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, they become the majority. So if you think about it from a change management standpoint, this population will become the majority. And if you can imprint on them early the 6 points of connection, within a lifetime or within a generation and a lifetime, but within a generation, you can actually change the entire culture of your city because you will have set a different set of expectations and behaviors for the majority. And then all the people that have helped them also start to adopt that change. So you create this virtuous flywheel by being able to make this a civic moment. It's important to recognize that new residents are navigating loss, transition, and isolation often alone. There are institutions that help them, but they tend to do it in silos. Different cultural organizations will just focus on that population, or a university, or an employer, but they're not really helping them integrate with the whole city. They're first sort of just embedding them within a specific community, and that's powerful, but we need to get them out of those silos. That's not enough. And no single organization or person owns helping people belong and to connect. We need to build chambers of connection in every city so that we can actually ensure there is ownership for supporting this population. The issues with newcomers, it's not inevitable. It really is a design choice. A design of how you want to build your city, how you want to build your town. Is welcoming newcomers do you want that to be part of what it means to be living in your city, part of the civic infrastructure, the social infrastructure, and to help make sure these people are not only thriving, but actually helping to lift up the whole city as they sort of become long-term residents over time. So based on all this, based on the case studies, based on our own work, based on other research that we've done, we've developed a 6 point framework. And I didn't want it to be 6 points because we have the 6 points of connection, but it turned out to be 6, and I didn't want to change it. So I know this is something I'm struggling with. I want to make it 5 or 7, didn't work out. There are 6 of these. Wanted to share this framework of really how to build a really powerful framework for welcoming newcomers into your city. I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit of detail, but wanted to sort of lay them out. The first one is you need a coordinating body that owns, aligns, and measures welcoming citywide. Secondly, you need a pro-social narrative. A lot of cities like Seattle, but also many, many other cities actually have an anti-social narrative. And the anti-social narrative then creeps into how you welcome people. So if you don't first build a pro-social narrative, it actually makes it much harder to make this change. You need city welcoming rituals. You actually need to build rituals around welcoming. You need to engage your major institutions in the area. You need to actually connect people to communities, not just institutions, but to communities. And then finally, you need to mobilize a large number of your residents as volunteers in this effort. So I'm going to go through each of these, but this is really the blueprint, the ecosystem, the framework for how to really think about the strategy for building a platform in your city or town. So the first one is building a coordinating body. This is a cross-sector group that says we want to be a welcoming city. We want to be an amazing place for people to move. We want to make sure that they're thriving, but also all those around them are thriving, and that they're the catalyst to bring out the best in all of us. When you look at who to bring into that council, you're looking for leaders that are part of the groups that are moving people in. So this is employers, schools, military, anchor institutions. Civic coordinators. So these are governments, backbone nonprofits. These are the organizations that are really the civic coordinators in your city. And then you want the service providers, those that honestly are most incented to help these folks because they're the ones that are getting the donations, the new membership, new customers, new volunteers, the organizations that are really motivated to engage them. If you build out a council or coordinating body around connection and around welcoming newcomers that has all these folks, you start to actually be able to triangulate something across a city to help newcomers. Second piece is you need a pro-social narrative. If you think about starting in a company has a brand, it has a culture it defines, it has values around it. And a good onboarding for new employees is starting to build a clear understanding of those values, that story, the narrative of that company. Same thing for a university. When I started at the University of Michigan, like you get indoctrinated into the story and being part of the story of that institution. We need to do the same thing for cities. They need to be able to build a pro-social narrative that people then who are already existing members of can reinforce, but that also new people helps them understand the expectations and how they want to show up. So name the local identity you want to live up to. Figure out how you get people around it. Show what welcoming looks like. Demonstrate that over and over again. So you start to build that as a pattern. Celebrate and repeat real examples of that pro-social narrative. And offer newcomers a clear path. What is the path to become part of that story? Two great examples here, just of positive and negative. An antisocial narrative, the Seattle freeze. This is what I found when I moved to Seattle. The core narrative was keep to yourself, don't intrude, welcoming is optional. The behavior is polite but distant, very few invitations. Newcomers generally navigate on their own. You compare that to Charleston, which has a sort of narrative of Charleston hospitality. Like that's the overall narrative. It's what the city's known for. It's what is reinforced in the culture. Greet people warmly. Offer help freely. Welcoming is expected. Like it's weird when someone's not welcoming. Introductions and conversations are the behavioral norm. Invitations to meals are the norm. There's pride in welcoming newcomers. Like it's something people take pride in actually doing. So this is such a critical piece because you can see you can build a lot of infrastructure around welcoming newcomers, but if you've got an antisocial narrative, it doesn't stick. You need to be able to start to build a positive narrative as a city, and it's something you want to bring your coordinating body together around to actually authentically build that narrative. So then you need to bring it to life through welcoming rituals. These are rituals that make belonging visible, shared, and expected. Some great examples, launching a welcome week. So actually having a week where the whole city focuses on the message of welcoming people. Have the mayor send a letter to anyone who moves. They've got the addresses. Send them a letter saying, hey, we're so glad you moved here. We want to tell you about the story of our city and how you fit in and what to expect, but also ways to reach out to the key people who can help you. One of the things we did in Seattle, find a way to actually create a city naturalization ceremony, a process to say, you are now a Seattleite, you are now a New Yorker. Don't make them guess or let anybody tell them they're not. Give them that chance to say, no, you are now one of us. You are not a them, you are an us. Host regular events, host community building events, host social club fairs. host events targeting newcomers, and that can be inside institutions like sports teams and museums. It can be in community centers. It can be the city doing it, but just create a regular drumbeat of events that are connecting people to community. Step four is institutional engagement. Every major institution needs to build welcoming into their overall experience, whether that's as a local business, whether that's as an employer, etc. Building these in starts to then create that culture where the rituals are embedded. So building welcoming moments into existing events and spaces, such as sports teams, museums, malls, and libraries. Include connection-focused onboarding for new employees and their families. Create citywide scavenger hunts. A couple of places have done this. It's super fun. Strengthen school onboarding. So, when you move to a new place with a family, like as a school, don't just onboard them to your school. Like think about how are you welcoming them there, but also to the broader community. And then use the coordinating body, that first step, to make sure that with each different population moving to the city, you don't have gaps and that you have continuity of experience so that you're really designing a full experience for each type of person moving to town to really truly embrace them. The fifth step is connecting to communities. So this is around two different types of communities. Communities of identity, so that can be faith-based, that can be around culture, it can be around a lot of different sort of types of identity, or it can be activity-based, sports, arts, etc., something that people enjoy doing. So strongly recommend like really building infrastructure to connect people to these communities so that even before someone moves, they know which communities to schedule time to go see. So faith-based organizations host community and activity fairs that enable people to quickly learn about them and join. Curate online directories of these places so that people can find them. Promote clubs, sports, arts, volunteering, and neighborhood groups. Offer warm handoffs. Don't just have people go cold, but find ways to have warm handoffs into these groups. And what we've seen a lot is there's a lot of these community groups that are there and they're awesome, but they actually don't know how to welcome newcomers. And newcomers often feel even more alienated because they come and everyone knows each other, and the newcomer immediately feels like they don't belong. So train community groups on how to identify someone who's new and create a process for bringing them into the community that quickly makes them feel like they belong. And then finally, we really need to mobilize volunteers on a large scale. We're doing this nationally with the Chamber of Connection of creating welcome committee volunteers. These are folks, ideally you've got like one on every block, that's sort of the dream, but these are volunteers who are spending a couple hours a month just doing activities to make people that live around them, especially newcomers, feel welcome, sense of belonging, helping them with their 6 points. I think in an ideal world, you want to plan for like roughly one volunteer per 100 new residents per year. So, if you had a place with 1,000 new residents a year, like you'd want 10 volunteers. You want to have enough so that you can actually support them and build those pathways. Organize volunteers by neighborhood. Some of this may already be happening in neighborhood associations. And then prioritize light touch, repeat connection over just one-time support. So find ways of creating ritual again. The most effective welcome committee members are going to be parts of institutions that are already part of touching newcomers. So it could be part of a church, it could be part of an employer, a university, where there's a natural and safe way to connect with newcomers. It can also just be people in the neighborhood, but really thinking about how do you find volunteers inside the institutions that are bringing people to town that are just a safe, natural way for people to start on that journey. So that's our sort of 6-step process for a city to build a really effective, robust process for that. Now I want to go into case studies. I want to share what we're doing at the Seattle Chamber of Connection, where we piloted last year. And I see several questions, people asking about the deck. So this full presentation is going to be launched as a playbook tomorrow. So everyone can download it starting tomorrow, as well as a discussion guide so that you can lead a discussion with your community about how you want to build these into your city or town. So quick case study on Seattle. Seattle welcomes about 140,000 new residents each year. And as I shared earlier, it's a population that really struggles, and it struggles with integration, partially because of the antisocial narrative, but also because there just isn't a lot of infrastructure for connecting them. So we started the first official sort of city onboarding, working with the mayor. We were able to get a tremendous amount of media coverage for it because people were just so excited about the potential to actually be a welcoming city, to make that change. We did monthly events, and what we saw is 81% of people coming to them plan to meet with someone who had a different background than themselves. So it's doing a great job of building bridging. And 74% of people feel like they know what connection they need and then how to actually go about acting on it. So we're seeing by just creating regular events that newcomers can go to and having content and curriculum that helps people meet other people, learn about their 6 points, meet organizations around those 6 points. We're seeing really encouraging early results. And our pro-social narrative, for those of you who haven't met him, is Sam the Bear. So we are working to shift Seattle from the Seattle freeze to the Seattle bear hug. The idea that when you move to Seattle, it should feel like not getting frozen, but instead being enveloped in the best bear hug ever. And we have a mascot that we now use at all of our events, as well as our partner events, to really bring that story to life, and have done a lot of media around him to start to just tell this story about, yeah, some people, live the Seattle freeze, but there's a lot of people who live the Seattle bear hug, and let's make that possible. Oh, I like that. The Seattle squeeze. Nice. So these are the events we do. We do them every month. We usually have around 100 people that attend. We're growing those to be more, and then we're trying to embed them inside organizations. But there are these powerful, 3 to 4 hour events where newcomers come together with locals, with volunteers, with community groups, and they just really develop a vision for the life they want to create in Seattle. And then they start to make commitments to build it together. So how have we done it? We've really used those 6 steps that we talked about. We've created a coordinating body. It's 45 people across sectors who are the committee that's in charge of welcoming newcomers to the city across institutions. We've started the process of reframing and building a pro-social narrative. We've started building city welcoming rituals, like the naturalization from the mayor, like the monthly events. We've started to do institutional engagement and working with some of the local employers and universities. We're doing regular events for local communities to be able to come and meet newcomers and get that to be safe for them. And then we started to build out a volunteer. We've got about now probably 200 volunteers that have signed up in Seattle to start the process of just localizing connection on the ground for folks. So, we're a year in. We are by no means like nailed it. We've got a lot more to learn. But we're seeing so far like people want to be a part of this. Having a story, a news story that people want to get behind is powerful. Starting to create rituals makes a difference. You've got to get the big institutions involved or it's not going to work. You've got to get all those local community groups involved or it's not going to work. And you just need a large volunteer pool that's on the front lines, really helping people on a one-to-one or small group basis. In the full playbook, which you can download tomorrow, we include case study on the Seattle Chamber of Connection, but also on Welcoming America, which is a phenomenal nonprofit that works specifically on welcoming immigrants from other countries as their core mission. They started to do broader work than that, but they've been for over a dozen years now doing phenomenal work, just helping cities develop practices around immigrants. Tulsa Remote, which is one of those cities that's really rebuilding and wanted people to move to the city. So they built a program where they actually fund and give 10,000 people, $10,000 to people to move to Tulsa and then spend time really making sure they stick. So they've done a lot of great work to think about what does it take to get someone to stick after you've invested in them moving there. And then Blue Star Families is a group that supports military families. There are 600,000 people in the military, and they move every 2 years within the US. And it is incredibly disruptive to them. So they've built this incredible national infrastructure for military families to be able to get support when they move. So each of these case studies really reveals key insights into how to build a welcoming program in your city, in your town. What we see across all these is that it works best when there is ownership and clear coordinating across institution. That there is true like rituals around this work. So people have like a regular drumbeat around it, that you're engaging large volumes of volunteers in the process, and that they all are using existing institutions as the gateway to reach people, that you're not going direct to newcomers, that you're actually using institutions as your primary mechanism for reaching people. And again, we've got sort of in-depth case studies on each of these in the full playbook, which is coming out tomorrow, but just a quick sneak preview there. We also spent time looking at some other, say, programs or best practices from other fields. So we looked at people starting a new job. What do the best employers do for a new job? What do universities and schools do for new students when they do it well? We looked at incarceration, like when people leave our criminal justice system, how do the best programs actually help them re-enter society effectively? We looked at, a professional sports team when families move because they get traded as part of a transaction to join the team. Sports teams do a brilliant job of really investing in families of their players. Obviously, we can't make that level of investment for every single person moving to a place like we do for, $10 million baseball players, but we can learn a lot from what they're doing and what they've learned. Alcoholics Anonymous is about a transition into sobriety. And this model has just been like perfected around how do you actually create a model to welcome people into that next stage of their lives, but to also build community and a sense of belonging within that community. And then the evangelical church, I think, is one of the most effective organizations when it comes to welcoming people into their community. And they have done a tremendous amount of work to really get the recipe dialed in for how to welcome people into their community so that they stick and feel a strong sense of belonging into that community. So as you look across these 6 different sort of, I won't call them case studies, but just related transitions, this is what we saw across all of them. Someone is responsible for noticing you and helping you orient. Like you're not on your own. Someone notices you, they connect with you immediately. Belonging comes from repeated everyday contact. It's not one off. You've got to build that habit of just being in touch with people consistently. Trust forms by doing things together. There's a ritual around doing things together. Familiar places provide stability during periods of change. That there's like a consistent place that people are coming to during that change that just makes it feel stable, makes it feel safe. And that all of them, in one way or another, bring service into the path very quickly. They convert people very quickly from newcomer to volunteer, and that they're then helping the next set of folks, that they're using that as a mechanism to actually scale their programs, but also just increase the sense of ownership and create more peer-to-peer support. So as you're thinking again about what you're building out in your local, welcoming process as a chamber of connection, or if you're doing it sort of on your own, these are the 5 things that we saw all of these folks did. And they also just reinforce our 6 steps, why it's so important to build that coordinating committee, all the way down to why volunteering is such an important part of the design of effective welcoming programs.